Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we creep into a mystery so twisted it's been pinned to billboards, whispered about in diners, and scribbled into decades of police reports. And here's the eerie part. Nobody agrees on what really happened. Get ready for smoke, shadows, and 5 children who may, or may not, have vanished into thin air. But fair warning, they probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments so I know who's staying up with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's Christmas Eve, 1945, Fayetteville, West Virginia. The snow falls gently, a Hollywood sort of evening. The Sodder family, George and Jenny, plus their 10 children, are winding down. Presents are wrapped, and a quiet hush settles over the 2-story home. Most of the kids fall asleep in the attic, lulled by dreams of Christmas morning. But just past midnight, smoke curls through the house. Flames crackle, chaos erupts. Jenny and George manage to flee with 4 of their children barefoot in the snow. But 5 are missing. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny Jr. and Betty. Just like that, they're gone. The fire burns the house to ash in under an hour. Firefighters arrive far too late, and as dawn breaks, the remnants of a joyful night lie smouldering. What should have been a simple if tragic house fire soon curls into something stranger. No bones are found in the ashes, not a tooth, not a charred fragment, nothing. The fire chief murmurs something about the blaze being too hot, which seems plausible until it's not. Cremation requires much higher and sustained heat than a house fire, and even then, bone fragments remain. Historians and forensic analysts point this out, nudging the door open to something darker. Did the 5 Sodder children die in the fire, or were they taken? Within weeks, whispers bubble up through the town. A woman claims to have seen the children peering out of a car window the next morning. A waitress in Charleston swears she served breakfast to 5 wide-eyed kids with 2 adults. Rumours sprout like weeds. One woman insists she saw the children in Florida, accompanied by strange men. Another claims they're in Italy. A third points to a nearby orphanage. With each story, George and Jenny's grief sharpens into obsession. They print flyers, hire private detectives, write to the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover personally responds. He'd love to help, he says, but it's not a federal matter. Local authorities shut down the idea of reopening the investigation. Undeterred, George travels the country, interviewing anyone with a shaky story and a tired smile. Years pass. The Sodders install a giant billboard along Route 16 just outside Fayetteville. On it, the children's photos, their names, and the bold question, what was their fate? For over 4 decades, the sign stands like a sentry, shouting at traffic, refusing to forget. Jenny never removes her black mourning dress. George dies in 1969, having spent his final years digging up plots of land, fueled by a tip that a child's grave might hold clues. It never does. In 1967, a photo arrives in the mail. It shows a young man in his 20s, dark-haired, solemn-eyed, strikingly similar to Louis Sodder. On the back, Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, Illil Boys, a 90132 or 35. That string of nonsense characters twists deeper into the mystery. No one can decode it. The Sodders send investigators to the return address in Kentucky, but they disappear too. No contact, no report. They just vanish. And so the case drips steadily into the folklore of America's darkest corners. It's a story with no centre, no satisfying ending. 5 children gone, no bodies, no smoke inhalation traces, no single confirmed sighting, yet no real evidence they died in the fire. And here's the part that makes you question everything. George Sodder was no ordinary small-town dad. He had strong political opinions, particularly against Benito Mussolini. This in a town thick with Italian immigrants, some fiercely pro-Mussolini. Not exactly a fan club you want to provoke. In fact, a stranger once visited the Sodder house before the fire and remarked that George's fuse box would cause a fire someday. Later, a ladder used for escape was found discarded in a ravine. The phone lines were deliberately cut. A man was seen stealing tools from the property. Each detail on its own. Coincidence. But pile them together and things get sticky, and even modern experts scratch their heads. Arson, abduction, a botched retaliation plot. Historians still argue whether the children died tragically in the fire or were taken as part of some vendetta. Fringe theories abound. Some believe the kids were abducted by child traffickers, others that they were raised in secrecy by a relative. A few even suggest they were whisked into a covert government program, though that's more popcorn than proof. Still, one can't ignore the timing. The war had just ended, black market dealings were rampant, and documentation was flimsy. Every Christmas the story resurfaces, a flicker of candlelight in an otherwise darkened house, the photo of Louis, the billboard long since removed but not forgotten, and a mother who never stopped mourning, not because she refused to accept loss, but because no one could definitively prove it. The Sodder mystery persists not just because 5 kids vanished, but because nothing about the aftermath makes sense. Fires leave bones, eyewitnesses don't multiply without a seed, and small towns don't usually ignite into labyrinths of deception and silence without a reason. Jenny Sodder died in 1989, still wearing black. Today people drive past the spot where the billboard once stood, sometimes not knowing the story. Others still pause, even pull over. Locals tell the tale with reverence, as if conjuring spirits. The old house is gone, replaced by new construction and fresh pavement. But to those who remember, it's still sacred ground. A place where something happened, something big, baffling and profoundly unfair. And if you ever drive through Fayetteville late at night, roll down your window, listen for the wind between the hills. Sometimes, they say, it carries voices, children laughing, or calling for help. Just don't expect answers. Not here, not from the shadows. Far below the icy silence of the South Pacific, in waters so deep they squeeze submarines like soda cans, something massive, something alive, stirs once, and then never again. The year is 1997. Scientists with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are tracking underwater sounds, mainly looking out for earthquakes or volcanic rumbles. But what they catch instead is strange. It begins low, so low it almost hums. Then it balloons, rising in pitch with a haunting organic swell, like the groan of an enormous beast, echoing through thousands of miles of open ocean. The sound, though recorded in multiple locations, originates near a place few people know and even fewer visit, a dark, cold void between Chile and Antarctica. They dub it the bloop. It lasts only about a minute. No ship, no storm, no undersea quake. Just a mysterious, bloated sound that seems too big for even a blue whale to make, and those are the largest animals ever known to exist. The bloop is louder than any marine life ever recorded, louder than a roaring volcano. So loud, in fact, it registers on hydrophones over 3,000 miles apart. Let that sink in. Oceanographers scratch their heads. Could it be ice cracking? Maybe a giant glacier calving far under the sea? Possibly, but it doesn't quite match that sound signature. Some suggest it's methane gas erupting from ocean floor vents. Others wonder if it's an uncharted underwater quake, or even an echo glitch, until they realise it's not just the sound itself that's odd. It's how alive it sounds. There's a warbling rhythm, an undulating pulse. It rises and falls the way only animal calls tend to. And not tiny animals either. If this were biological in origin, whatever made it would have to be several times the size of a blue whale. That's about 100 feet long already, by the way. So imagine something more. Cue the sea monster theories. Cryptozoologists leap into the frenzy with toothy enthusiasm. Could it be a surviving megalodon? A kraken? Cthulhu doing vocal warm-ups? One fringe theory even links the bloop's coordinates with H.P. Lovecraft's fictional sunken city of R'lyeh, home of the cosmic horror himself. You can practically hear the eldritch tentacles slithering through fan forums. But marine biologists aren't having it. Some suggest an undiscovered giant squid, except squid don't make sounds like that. Others theorise enormous fish with inflatable air bladders, but the frequencies are still off. For years it stays on the list of unexplained acoustic phenomena next to other classics like Julia, Train, and the always creepy Slow Down. Then, like any good horror movie, the trail goes cold. No other bloop-like events follow. No carcass washes up on any beach. No mega-giant sea creature drifts across sonar. The ocean is vast, true, but even vastness leaves breadcrumbs. This one? Nothing. And here's where things get twisty. In the early 2000s, NOAA scientists publicly revised their theory. They now say the bloop was probably an ice quake, a sound created by an iceberg cracking and shifting deep underwater. They even cite similar sounds recorded later that seem to match. Case closed? Well, sort of. See, not everyone's convinced. The original bloop had unique frequency curves, far different from the glacial events captured afterward. It also happened only once, unlike other ice quakes, which tend to repeat or cascade. The original bloop wasn't just loud, it was dynamic, fluid, almost like language. That's not to say it was language, but it had cadence, emotion, a ripple of intent. And if that wasn't enough to keep people up at night, there's the depth factor. Blue whales only dive so deep, about 500 metres. The bloop, it came from thousands of metres below, far beneath the level any known marine mammal can reach, let alone vocalise from, down where the pressure would crush your bones into pudding. So whatever made that sound, if it was alive, wasn't just big, it was built for a world we can barely imagine. Some fringe researchers argue it could be a creature adapted to extreme depths, something with sonar far more powerful than whales, something that doesn't surface, doesn't need air, and has remained undetected because no one is looking deep enough. And why would we? The deep sea is less explored than the moon. Who knows what broods in trenches that stretch 7 miles into darkness? Historians of science often note how many impossible creatures were discovered only recently, like the colossal squid, which no one had seen alive until 2007, or the coelacanth, thought extinct for 65 million years, suddenly found flapping around off the coast of South Africa in 1938. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not out there, and that's the bloop's enduring chill. It leaves just enough on the table to make you question what else the sea is hiding. If a sound that loud, that strange, can happen once and never again, what else might be swimming in the cold, unseen trenches of the earth? The South Pacific bloop zone remains a ghost map on deep-sea charts. Scientists still monitor that region, but no repeats have ever occurred. It's a dead zone of silence, which in some ways is more unsettling than constant noise, as if something let itself be heard once and then slipped back into shadow. One acoustic analyst described the sound as like something waking up, a strange choice of words. Another scientist, less dramatic, called it a mystery we'll likely never solve. So here we are, floating on a blue marble with 5 oceans, 620,000 kilometres of coastline, and only 5% of the ocean floor fully mapped. Every year we find new jellyfish, new worms, even new sharks, but never another bloop. Maybe it was an iceberg, maybe it was the earth grumbling in its sleep, or maybe, just maybe, it was something vast, old, and terribly alive, exhaling once from the blackness to let us know it exists. And if that's true, well, we haven't heard the last of it. He boards the plane with a quiet confidence, his suit crisp, his black tie simple but elegant, and a briefcase tucked neatly under one arm. It's November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. Northwest Orient Flight 305 is a short hop from Portland to Seattle, a little over 30 minutes in the air. Passengers settle into their seats. Flight attendants smile. The cabin hums with anticipation for the holidays. Then he passes a note to the stewardess. She assumes it's a flirtatious scribble, common enough in those days. She pockets it without reading, but the man leans closer, his voice low, polite, almost apologetic. "Miss," he says, "you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Thus begins one of the most astonishing unsolved mysteries in American history. The only unsolved case of air piracy in US aviation. The man gives his name as Dan Cooper. Later, the press, thanks to a reporting error, will immortalise him as D.B. Cooper. He becomes legend overnight. Inside his briefcase are red cylinders and wires, enough to pass for a bomb, or at least convince anyone it might be one. Cooper doesn't shout, doesn't threaten wildly. He simply tells the stewardess what he wants: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the plane for a second leg. When they land in Seattle, authorities scramble. The passengers are released unharmed, having no idea anything had even happened. Cooper receives his money and the parachutes. The plane, now refueled, takes off again with just the crew and Cooper aboard. His new destination, Mexico City, allegedly. But somewhere over the dense, rainy forests of southwestern Washington, Cooper opens the rear stairway of the Boeing 727. He straps on a parachute, secures the cash, bundled in a bank bag, and leaps into the night. into legend. The storm outside rages. The air is icy. The visibility minimal, and Cooper is never seen again, ever. What follows is a manhunt so intense it practically scorches the ground. FBI agents swarm the suspected drop zone, a stretch of remote wilderness dotted with pine, cliffs and fast-moving rivers. Dogs sniff, helicopters buzz, and thousands of volunteers stomp through mud and brush. Nothing. No parachute, no body, no briefcase, no money. They comb the woods for weeks, then months. Nothing. The FBI interviews thousands of people. They fingerprint every known suspect who might have had military training, skydiving experience, or a reason to disappear. Still, Cooper remains a ghost. Then, in 1980, a break. A boy digging along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, finds 3 bundles of weathered cash, stained and matted, but still recognizable. The serial numbers match those given to Cooper. The total, $5,800. Still bundled, still crisp inside the core. But here's the catch. The money wasn't found along the expected flight path. It was buried under layers of sediment, suggesting it had been deliberately hidden or carried there by some unknown method. The remaining $194,200 still missing. The briefcase? Gone. The parachutes? Never found. Theories abound. Some believe Cooper didn't survive the jump. The terrain was brutal. The weather unforgiving. He had no GPS, no light, no way of steering the parachute. If he missed his target, or had no target, he might have hit a tree, drowned in a river, or broken his legs on a rock. Yet no bones, no clothes, no gear ever surfaced. Others think he survived and thrived. One theory posits that Cooper was an experienced paratrooper, possibly ex-military, who used outdated but reliable equipment to fake an amateur's panic. The 4 parachutes he requested? One was intentionally sabotaged. A decoy. He chose correctly. Not only that, he had the calm of a man who'd done this before. In 2007, the FBI released composite sketches again, hoping to stir up new leads. But all they got were more dead ends, and a steady drip of new suspects, each more colourful than the last. There was Dwayne Webber, a dying man who allegedly confessed to being Cooper on his deathbed. His wife remembered him having nightmares, mumbling about jumps and even keeping a bank bag like the one described. But no forensic evidence ever tied him to the case. Then came Kenneth Christiansen, a former paratrooper and flight attendant who had the right build, a suspicious bank account post in 1971, and a fondness for black ties. Still, handwriting analysis and DNA weren't conclusive. Later, Richard McCoy, a Vietnam vet who hijacked a plane in 1972, using nearly the exact same methods. He was caught, escaped prison, and was killed in a shootout with the FBI. Many believe McCoy was too brash to be Cooper, but the parallels are eerie. Still, none of these suspects stuck. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016, citing lack of resources and progress, but that hasn't stopped citizen sleuths from dedicating their lives and YouTube channels to cracking the mystery. Forums light up with amateur theories, computer models, and new evidence every year. And historians still argue whether Cooper was a criminal mastermind or just a lucky chancer who got away with the perfect heist. The mystery taps into something primal, the idea that someone could game the system, stick it to the man, and vanish without a trace. No victims, no violence, just one man with a plan, a parachute, and a suitcase full of untraceable 20s. Even the FBI, for all its professionalism, seemed to carry a reluctant admiration for Cooper. He was no anarchist, no sociopath. He thanked the flight attendants, paid for his drinks, and kept his cool. He smoked Raleigh cigarettes. He drank bourbon and soda. He left behind no usable fingerprints. He was, by all accounts, a gentleman thief. Today, Cooper lives on in pop culture. He's referenced in movies, TV shows, books, even music. There's an annual festival in Ariel, Washington, celebrating the mystery. Enthusiasts arrive in vintage pilot gear. Children sell lemonade next to life-size cutouts of Cooper. It's become folklore, the story of the man who jumped into the night and became immortal. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real mystery isn't whether he survived, or where the money went, or what his real name was. Maybe the reason we can't stop talking about D.B. Cooper is because, in a world that tracks every move, watches every face, and digitizes every footprint, he did the unthinkable. He disappeared, cleanly, quietly, forever. And so, when the sky darkens over the Pacific Northwest and the wind begins to howl, some still glance upward, half expecting to see a black tie fluttering in the breeze, a briefcase clutched tight, and a man descending from the clouds like a ghost. Because in the end, legends don't die, they just vanish. It's a warm August night in 1977, and Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope hums gently in the dark. This particular piece of equipment doesn't resemble the giant satellite dishes from science fiction movies. It's more like a large, flat field of wires and reflectors, scanning the heavens for any sign of intelligent life. And tonight, something extraordinary happens. The signal comes from the constellation Sagittarius, lasting precisely 72 seconds, the exact time it takes the telescope's fixed beam to sweep over one patch of sky. It's strong, narrow band, and eerily distinct from the background hiss of the universe. Jerry Amon, a volunteer astronomer reviewing the data days later, circles the string of numbers and letters on the printout. Then, in a fit of sheer disbelief, he scribbles one word in red ink beside it. Wow! Thus, the wow signal earns its place among the greatest unsolved mysteries in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. What makes it so compelling isn't just the intensity, though that's impressive, but its sheer specificity. The frequency, 1,400 to 20.456 megahertz, aligns almost exactly with the hydrogen line, a frequency naturally emitted by neutral hydrogen atoms. Why is that important? Well, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Scientists have long speculated that any intelligent civilization broadcasting into space might use this frequency as a kind of cosmic calling card. In other words, the wow signal might just be someone, or something, trying to say hello. But the signal has one major flaw. It never repeats. Despite dozens, even hundreds, of follow-up attempts to scan that exact part of the sky using increasingly sophisticated equipment, the wow signal has never been detected again. It's a one-hit wonder from the stars, brief, brilliant, and gone. Skeptics immediately try to explain it away. Could it have been a reflection from Earth, a passing satellite, a military test signal? But none of those explanations hold up under scrutiny. The signal wasn't broad spectrum like man-made interference. It didn't drift or vary the way a moving source would. It fit the profile of something stationary, deliberate, and distant. And yet, the absence of repetition nags at researchers. In science, repeatability is king. Without it, the signal remains a tantalizing anomaly, like a radio station flickering into existence just long enough to whisper a secret and then vanishing forever. Fringe theorists love the wow signal, of course. Some claim it proves aliens are real but shy. Others believe it was a targeted message aimed only at us, carefully timed and encoded. One theory suggests it was an automated probe passing through our region of space, programmed to broadcast at intervals of centuries. But perhaps the strangest hypothesis is that the signal didn't originate from another solar system, but from something much closer, an unknown satellite, or worse, a secret terrestrial source meant to mimic extraterrestrial contact. Historians of the event still argue whether the wow signal was natural or artificial, extraterrestrial or earthly. Some scientists remain hopeful it will reappear. Others suspect we may have caught a fleeting glimpse of something incredibly rare, like lightning on another planet, or an alien civilization that's since gone dark. One wrinkle emerged in 2016, when a team proposed the signal might have come from a comet. Two, in fact, 266P/Christensen and 335P/Gibbs were passing through that region of space around the time the wow signal was detected. Comets emit hydrogen gas, and the theory suggests this might have created the signal. But critics point out that comets don't emit hydrogen in the narrowband range detected. And besides, why haven't other comets triggered similar signals? So the comet theory fades, and we're left again with the silence. The wow signal's coordinates are RA 19 hours, 22 minutes 24.64 seconds, deck minus 27 degrees 3 minutes, somewhere deep in the darkness between the stars. Some have dubbed the region the quiet zone, a place where nothing is spoken before or since. But it hasn't stopped people from listening. Institutions continue scanning, ears tuned to that same spectral neighbourhood, hoping lightning might strike twice, and in the meantime, it's become cultural shorthand for cosmic mystery. The wow signal appears in novels, video games, sci-fi scripts. Some see it as proof of something larger than ourselves, a wink from the cosmos, or a breadcrumb leading us into deeper questions. Others say it's nothing more than space noise, misinterpreted by wishful humans desperate for connection. But let's pause for a moment. Imagine you're out there, on a distant world with your own oceans, clouds, cities. You build a transmitter. You fire off a message across the void, not knowing if it will ever arrive, not knowing if anyone will understand. You hope. And for 72 seconds, on a summer night in 1977, someone hears you. They circle your voice in red ink and write, "Wow." Then, silence. Could it have been a message? A signal flare? An automated beacon? Or just the cosmos coughing in a way that sounds oddly intentional? We may never know. But the idea that we could know keeps telescopes pointed skyward. The moment you give up the search is the moment you close the door to the unknown. And so, the wow. Signal endures, not just as a data point, but as a symbol of curiosity, of longing, of the weird, irrational hope that we're not the only ones who've looked up and wondered. Because maybe, somewhere out there, someone is still listening. The town of Taos, New Mexico, lies nestled between red deserts and snowy peaks, a postcard blend of high desert mysticism and adobe calm. It's the kind of place where time slouches, where artists drift in with paint on their hands, and where the mountains always seem to be watching. But for some residents, the peace is disturbed by a strange, persistent sound. It doesn't come from any machine, and it isn't tied to any natural source. They simply call it the hum. It starts as a low-frequency rumble, barely above a whisper. It never spikes, never fades. It just is. For some, it's like the distant throb of an idling diesel engine. For others, it's a slow drumming that never stops. It vibrates deep in the chest, keeps people awake, makes them ill, and worst of all, no one else seems to hear it. It's not just one or two folks. A 1993 survey revealed that around 2% of Taos residents, dozens of people, claim to hear the hum regularly. The phenomenon wasn't limited to any one age group, occupation, or background. Some were retirees, others artists, a few were engineers or local business owners. All swore the sound was real, and all described it in uncannily similar terms. But here's where things get strange. Sensitive microphones and high-tech sensors detect nothing. No rumble, no radio frequency, no seismic vibration, nothing measurable, just silence. Yet the people hearing it? They aren't delusional. Audiologists tested their hearing. Psychologists ruled out hallucinations. The hum persisted. Some listeners claim the sound is directional. When they turn their heads or move between rooms, the intensity changes. Others say it's worse at night, or when things go quiet, especially in remote areas where human-made noise drops off completely. It follows them, lingers, and it doesn't seem to come from anywhere, which makes it impossible to escape. Desperate, some sufferers move away. Others try soundproofing their homes, burying white noise machines under pillows, even sleeping in basements wrapped in aluminum foil-lined walls. Nothing works. The theories begin to pile up. Some blame secret military experiments. They point to nearby installations, whispering about low-frequency weapons and radar tests. Others say the sound is linked to subterranean mining or fracking activity, causing unknown acoustic effects. A few believe it's the Earth itself, a natural resonance caused by tectonic tension, a literal groan from beneath the crust. Fringe theorists go further. They suggest the hum is a signal, possibly extraterrestrial or interdimensional. A few believe it's the byproduct of HAARP, a government project often accused, without evidence, of weather control and mind manipulation. Others point toward electromagnetic hypersensitivity, a debated condition where people claim to be physically affected by Wi-Fi, cell towers, and electric currents. Still, none of these theories explain why only some people hear the hum, and why it occurs in isolated spots around the world. That's right, Taos isn't alone. Similar hums have been reported in Bristol, England, Kokomo, Indiana, and Largs, Scotland. In Canada, a persistent hum near Windsor, Ontario, rattled nerves for years. There's even a global hum map online, where self-reported cases dot continents like a plague of invisible bees, and yet each hum seems unique. Different frequencies, different rhythms, But the effect? The same. Distress, sleeplessness, a growing sense that something isn't right. Back in Taos, the mystery attracted national attention. CBS ran a segment. Scientists from Los Alamos and the University of New Mexico conducted a formal investigation. They brought in spectrum analyzers, audio recorders, and even low-frequency listening devices. Their conclusion? Inconclusive. They found no consistent external source for the sound. Some suggested it might be otoacoustic emissions, sounds generated within the ear itself. Others proposed mild forms of tinnitus, although the reported hum differs significantly in character. Tinnitus usually manifests as ringing or buzzing. The hum is a feeling as much as a sound. You don't hear it, you sense it, like a pressure behind the eyes, which opens up yet another theory. Perhaps the hum is psychological, a form of mass suggestion or somatic fixation. Once someone believes in the sound, their mind creates it. But that theory, while convenient, doesn't account for cases where the hum begins with no prior exposure or awareness. And that's the maddening part. There's just enough evidence to take it seriously, but never enough to solve it. Even today, the Taos hum remains one of the most studied acoustic anomalies on record. It's real enough to ruin sleep, trigger headaches, and drive people from their homes, but also invisible, untouchable, like a secret signal whispering through the air, heard only by a chosen or cursed few. Historians note the strange timing. The Taos hum began to be reported heavily in the early 1990s, a time of enormous technological change. Satellite proliferation, the dawn of the internet, wireless everything. Coincidence? Possibly. Or maybe something began humming just beneath the surface of daily life, unnoticed by most. Or maybe the hum was always there, and people are only now starting to notice. In the years since the story first broke, some residents say the sound faded, or that they've adjusted to it. Others insist it's stronger than ever. But with no official explanation, the hum has become local legend, spoken about in cafes, pondered during yoga classes, murmured over beers as the desert sun dips behind the Sangre de Cristo mountains. A sound that can't be heard, a signal that can't be traced, a mystery that sits just at the edge of silence. And late at night, when the town goes quiet and the last car rolls off the highway, some still hear it, that subtle rhythmic thrum beneath everything. Not loud, but relentless. Circleville, Ohio is the kind of place where people wave from porches and rumours travel faster than trains. A quiet, middle American town where secrets are supposed to stay tucked under white fences and church whispers. But starting in 1976, Circleville receives a series of anonymous letters that unravel the town's calm like a sweater thread caught on a nail. The letters are handwritten, aggressive, and deeply personal. They accuse residents of infidelity, corruption, embezzlement, even murder. Whoever is writing them knows everyone's business, and not just public business, but the kind of dirt you only share behind closed doors or in diary margins. At first, it seems like a prank. But when school bus driver Mary Gillespie receives a letter accusing her of having an affair with the local school superintendent, things turn ugly. The writer threatens her to stop, or else her life and her family's will be in danger. Mary shrugs it off, until the letters keep coming, each more menacing than the last. Her husband Ron also begins receiving the letters. Then the writer takes things further, posting signs along Mary's bus route, warning children about their driver's dirty secret. The signs are public, humiliating, and impossible to ignore. Then, Ron gets a phone call. He tells family members he's going to confront whoever is behind the letters. Moments later, he's found dead. His truck is crashed into a tree off a rural road. The circumstances are suspicious. The sheriff claims Ron was drunk, though friends insist he was sober. There's a gun nearby, recently fired, but no one knows at what, and no shell casings are found. The death is ruled an accident, but the letters keep coming. Even after Ron's death, they arrive like clockwork, and not just to Mary. Other residents start receiving them too, each filled with poison words, dark allegations, and threats, scrawled in blocky handwriting. They seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. The postmarks shift between towns. No fingerprints are ever found. Then, in 1983, Mary is nearly killed. While driving her school bus route, she spots a sign on the side of the road. It's another accusation. Furious, she pulls over to tear it down. Behind it, she discovers a crude booby trap, a box rigged with a string and a pistol aimed at her face. The gun doesn't fire, but it's real, and someone clearly intended for her to die. Police trace the serial number. The gun belongs to Paul Fresher, Ron Gillespie's former brother-in-law. Fresher insists he's innocent, claims someone stole the gun from his garage. He even agrees to take a handwriting test. Authorities give him a sample of the poison pen letters and ask him to copy them. Later, they claim the similarities are incriminating, although critics argue the test was wildly unscientific. Freshour is convicted of attempted murder and sent to prison. And here's where the story gets weirder. Even after Paul Freshour is locked up, cut off from the outside world, under supervision, the letters keep coming. Not just one or two, hundreds. They're postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, miles away. They reach police, journalists, even Freshour himself. The handwriting is the same. The threats are the same. The chilling tone never changes. Authorities insist Paul must be behind it. Maybe he convinced someone on the outside to keep writing. Maybe he smuggled the letters out. But prison officials maintain he had no way to do that. No access to stamps, no visitors, no opportunities. Still, the letters continue. Some say they're even angrier now, as if the writer feels smug, triumphant, maybe even amused. Eventually, Freshour is released from prison on parole in 1994. The letters stop, but no one is ever officially identified as the writer. Decades later, the Circleville letter mystery remains unresolved. Some residents believe Paul was innocent, set up by someone who knew how to frame him perfectly. Others think he may have been the original letter writer, but that someone else picked up the torch after his arrest. A few believe the real culprit was someone with access to law enforcement files, able to drop accusations that felt eerily accurate. In 2022, a group of amateur sleuths revisited the case, attempting modern handwriting analysis and psychological profiling. Their findings were inconclusive, but they leaned toward the theory that there were multiple writers. Maybe the whole town got swept up in a game of suspicion, or maybe the original writer inspired copycats. Historians still argue whether the Circleville letters were the work of one deeply disturbed person or a collective unspoken rot inside a small town. And here's a quirky twist. After the story appeared on Unsolved Mysteries, the show's host received a letter. It was unsigned, postmarked from Ohio, and written in the same slanted, blocky style. It warned him to stay out of Circleville. He did. Even today, Circleville tries to move on. The letters are a sore subject. Most of the town doesn't want to talk about them. And really, who can blame them? They lived through years of whispered threats, of peeking over shoulders and second-guessing neighbours, of checking the mail with a thudding heart. The postman probably never knew whether he was delivering birthday cards or bombs. Because that's the true horror of the Circleville mystery. Not just that someone knew everyone's secrets, but that they could weaponize them so effectively. That words, written in plain ink on cheap paper, could paralyze a town for years. And maybe that's why the case endures. Not because it's unsolved, but because it feels like it shouldn't be. The clues are all there. The gun, the handwriting, the timing. But like a jigsaw puzzle with just one wrong piece, nothing quite fits. The letter writer is still out there. Or was. Or is again. Who knows? So if you ever pass through Circleville, be polite, smile at the neighbours, wave to the mailman, and if you get a letter, unsigned, slanted, filled with things no one should know, maybe don't open it. Just burn it. Reincarnation is a big word. It's got weight. Centuries of lore stacked behind it, from Tibetan monks to New Age crystal shops. But in the sleepy town of Hexham, England, a story unfolds that makes even skeptics blink and lean in closer. It begins not with monks or mystics, but with a tragic car accident and a pair of identical twins who, some claim, may have lived twice. Meet the Pollock family, John and Florence, a working-class couple raising their daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline in post-war England. The girls are lively, clever and inseparable. Joanna is 11, the older sister, confident and imaginative. Jacqueline, just 6, idolises her sister, copying her mannerisms, her expressions, even her walk. On May 5th, 1957, tragedy strikes. As the girls walk to church, a car barrels around the corner, driven by a woman under the influence of drugs and grief. She's just lost custody of her own children. She's not thinking clearly. She hits the Pollock sisters and a friend. All three girls die instantly. The town reels. John and Florence are shattered. But then something strange begins to stir. Not months, not years, but days later, John begins to insist their daughters will return. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. Florence is horrified. She sees it as denial, a refusal to grieve properly. John, meanwhile, becomes obsessed. He prays nightly, asking for the girls to come back. He reads about reincarnation. He clings to signs. And then Florence becomes pregnant. She gives birth on October 4th, 1958. Twin girls. The Pollocks hadn't expected twins. There's no family history of them. It's rare, almost miraculous. But what stuns them more are the similarities. The younger twin, Jennifer, has a birthmark on her waist and another on her forehead, identical to Jacqueline's. Gillian, the elder by 10 minutes, favours Joanna in build and temperament. At first, it's chalked up to coincidence, genetic chance. But as the girls grow, things get eerie. The twins begin identifying toys that belong to their deceased sisters without ever having seen them. They ask for specific dolls by name. One day, they stumble upon an old storage box and become visibly excited, calling the contents by names no one taught them. They also begin referencing events and places they've never experienced. They talk about a school they've never attended. They mention a swing set in a garden the family no longer owns. And once, when crossing the street, Jennifer clutches her sister tightly and cries, "The car! It's coming to get us!" Neither girl had ever been told the details of their sister's death. The parents, now quietly terrified, keep detailed journals. John becomes convinced the twins are somehow reincarnations of Joanna and Jacqueline. Florence remains sceptical until one moment changes her mind forever. She overhears the girls playing a game in their bedroom. Gillian lies down on the floor and pretends her head is bleeding. Jennifer crouches beside her, saying, "That's where the car hit you." Neither child had ever been shown photos of the accident, but Jennifer's wound mirrors the exact injury Jacqueline suffered. The story attracts the attention of Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia and one of the few academics studying reincarnation seriously. Stevenson interviews the family and catalogues dozens of similar cases around the world, but the Pollocks remain his most compelling Western example. He notes the consistency of the memories, the physical similarities, the behavioural overlaps. He observes how the girls grow out of their past life memories around age 5, a pattern found in many alleged reincarnation cases. Children remember past lives vividly in early childhood, then forget them as they age. But here's the twist. Gillian and Jennifer as adults both later recall flashes of memories they shouldn't have. Gillian, at age 21, dreams vividly of a park in Wickham, where she'd never been. She describes it in detail, down to the layout of the swings and the gravel paths. Her parents confirm it was one of Joanna's favourite places. Jennifer, for her part, never quite shakes the feeling that she's lived before. Skeptics, of course, raise eyebrows. They suggest John and Florence may have, consciously or not, fed the girls information about their dead sisters, that the children's memories could be implanted, not recovered, that birthmarks are just birthmarks, not soul scars. But the problem with this theory is that the girls remembered things before their parents reintroduced old belongings, and their knowledge often went beyond the Pollocks' own memories, striking details neither parent had told anyone. One curious fact: the girls used pet names and inside jokes that Joanna and Jacqueline had used only in private, names not written in journals, phrases not remembered by their parents, and historians still argue whether the Pollock twins represent the best evidence for reincarnation or just an elaborate psychological illusion born from grief. A fringe theory suggests the girls were part of a much stranger phenomenon, soul fragments reuniting or overlapping lifelines. Another proposes residual memory imprinting, as if intense emotional trauma could burn memories into genetic material. No matter the theory, no one can quite explain why two identical twins, born after a freak accident, should exhibit memories, fears, and personalities so perfectly aligned with two dead sisters. The Pollock twins eventually grew up and moved on. They didn't live their lives in the spotlight. They didn't tour psychic fairs or write memoirs. They lived quietly as sisters do, their strange past trailing behind them like a shadow that only shows up when the sun hits just right. But in a sleepy English town their story still echoes. A pair of girls died, a pair were born, and something odd, delicate and just shy of provable, passed between them. So if you ever find yourself in Northumberland, walking down one of those narrow country lanes, listen closely. Not for the sound of tyres or bird song, but for a whispered giggle, the kind that seems to come from nowhere, and maybe, just maybe, from another time. It begins with a snowstorm and ends with 9 frozen bodies sprawled across a Siberian mountainside. What happened in between remains one of the strangest cold case mysteries in history, a tale of fear, flight, and something so disturbing that seasoned investigators left the case marked with a simple word: unknown. It's January 1959, deep in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. A group of experienced hikers, all young and fit, mostly students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, embark on a winter trek through a remote region called the Dyatlov Pass. The leader, Igor Dyatlov, is meticulous. Every detail is planned, every ski boot laced tight. There are 10 hikers to start. One turns back early with a knee injury, sparing himself what's to come. The remaining 9 press on into a landscape of endless snow and ghostly silence. They set up camp on the slopes of Kholat Shakal, a name that translates to Mountain of the Dead in the language of the local Mansi people. And then, nothing. When they fail to return as scheduled, search parties are dispatched. What they find in the following weeks defies explanation. The tent is discovered first, slashed open from the inside. Inside, all their gear, boots, coats, food, even their skis, left behind as if in a panic. Footprints in the snow tell a story of people walking, not running, into the night, barefoot or in socks. Some prints show only one shoe. They lead into the forest. The first 2 bodies are found near a fire beneath a tree, stripped to their underwear. Their hands are burned, likely from frantic attempts to keep warm. Nearby, broken branches suggest one of them tried to climb the tree, perhaps looking for something, or running from something. Further into the forest, 3 more bodies, Dyatlov among them, are found sprawled in the snow. All face the tent as if they were trying to return. No external wounds, no signs of struggle, just frozen, eyes open, lips parted as if caught mid-scream. 2 months later, the last 4 are found in a ravine partially buried beneath snow. These bodies tell a darker tale. One woman is missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips. Another has a caved-in skull. 2 more show massive chest trauma, injuries so severe one expert compares them to a car crash. And yet, no external bruising, no broken skin, just internal destruction, as if the damage came from within. There are no signs of avalanche, no animal tracks. The tent's position and condition rule out most natural disasters. So what happened? Soviet authorities launch an investigation. Quickly, and then quietly, it ends. The official conclusion: a compelling natural force. That's it. No details, no follow-up. The files are sealed for decades, and the rumours begin. Some suggest an avalanche, but the footprints, the tent's placement, and the lack of snow damage say otherwise. Others propose hypothermia-induced insanity. Known as paradoxical undressing, it causes victims to strip despite freezing temperatures. But that doesn't explain the violent internal injuries. One fringe theory involves the Mansi people, suggesting an attack in defence of sacred land. But there's no evidence of conflict, no other footprints, no blood. Then, someone floats the idea of military involvement. It's the Cold War, after all, and this is Soviet territory, full of test ranges and secrets. Could the hikers have stumbled onto something they shouldn't have? A secret weapons test? A parachute mine explosion? Some point to high levels of radiation found on the hikers' clothes as evidence. And then there's the strange orange hue on some of the body's skin and the missing eyebrows. Others think even darker thoughts. Maybe they encountered something not human. UFO sightings in the region spike in the days following their disappearance. Local reports describe glowing orbs in the sky. One hiker even wrote in her diary about strange lights. Were they followed? Were they watched? Did something descend upon them? Historians still argue whether the incident was a tragic accident, a botched cover-up, or a brush with the unexplainable. In 2013, the Russian government reopened the case under public pressure. Their new conclusion: a slab avalanche, a rare event where a sheet of snow slides without much warning or surface damage. But many experts dispute this. The terrain doesn't fit, and it doesn't account for the internal injuries or the fact that the tent was slashed from the inside. And then there's the final photo. Found on one of the hiker's cameras, the last frame is overexposed, blurry, and appears to show bright lights in the sky. Some say it's just a flash. Others believe it's something more, something watching from above. Fringe theories continue to bloom. Ball lightning, secret psychological experiments, infrasound, a natural phenomenon where low-frequency wind vibrations induce panic and hallucination. A plausible idea, but again, doesn't explain the blunt force trauma. And what about the woman with the missing tongue? Some say scavengers. Others argue the way her injuries were concentrated around her mouth points to something more deliberate, possibly an attempt to silence. The man who turned back early, Yuri Yudin, lives to an old age, haunted by the mystery. He visits the memorial site often and insists to his dying day something was out there with them. Today, the Dyatlov Pass incident is immortalized in documentaries, books and podcasts. There's even a museum in Yekaterinburg dedicated to the tragedy. Hikers leave offerings, conspiracy theorists draw maps, theories pile like snowdrifts, and still, no answers. Just 9 lives lost in the white silence, 9 stories cut off mid-sentence. If you stand on the pass now, it's eerily quiet. The wind rolls low over the peaks. The trees creak. You can see for miles, but you feel watched. Always watched. A place where logic begins to slip and the snow keeps its secrets. And if you listen long enough, you might hear it. Not the wind, not the snow shifting, but the echo of a scream that never made it home. Tokyo, 1954. A balmy summer day, the kind where even the office towers seem to sweat. At Haneda Airport, customs officers go about their routine, checking passports, stamping forms, waving travellers through with weary precision. Then a man approaches. He's well-dressed, middle-aged, unassuming. He carries a briefcase and speaks fluent French and Japanese. Nothing unusual until they ask him for his passport. He hands it over. It looks authentic. Visas are neatly stamped. The paper is high quality, but the country listed on it doesn't exist. It says Tord. Confused, the officers ask him to clarify. He's calm, polite, even helpful. He explains that Taurid is a small country nestled between France and Spain. It's been there for over 1,000 years. He's travelled to Japan on business before. In fact, he points out the embassy of Taurid listed in his address book. But when customs agents check the maps, there's nothing between France and Spain except Andorra. No Taurid. Never has been. The man becomes increasingly frustrated, and perhaps just a touch panicked. He insists the country exists. He shows them currency from various European nations. His wallet holds ID cards, credit cards from legitimate banks. His driver's license is valid. But every piece of documentation refers back to this non-existent nation. They place him under guard in a hotel room, with instructions not to leave while officials investigate further. The room is several stories up, with no balcony, no exterior access. 2 guards remain posted outside. The next morning, the man from Taurid is gone. Vanished, no trace. The room is untouched. The bed slept in, the window locked. But he is nowhere. Even his documents disappear. Passport, licenses, checkbook gone like smoke. There is no checkout, no witnesses, no explanation. It's as if he was never there. The story, though lacking official confirmation, circulates through urban legends, forums and obscure books. Some skeptics dismiss it as myth, but the details are too rich, too consistent to die. And besides, other cases follow. Across decades, reports emerge of individuals carrying passports from countries that don't exist, or speaking languages no one recognises. One man in Paris claimed to be from Laxaria, located in a place that doesn't show up on any map. Another woman spoke what sounded like a mix of Slavic and something entirely alien, baffling linguists for days. What are these people? Hoaxes? Victims of elaborate pranks? Or, as some believe, travellers from parallel dimensions? That theory, while sounding like science fiction, has a surprising number of scientists entertaining it. According to multiverse concepts, infinite universes could exist alongside ours, each with slight or massive variations. In one, Taurid might very well exist, and through a rift, an anomaly, or just a blip in quantum mechanics, someone, or something, could slip through. The man from Taurid might not have been lost. He might have simply gone home. There are other strange echoes. In 2008, a man was stopped at Munich airport carrying a passport from the Republic of Nigeria. No such country. The passport looked real. He insisted it had worked before. It wasn't forged, it was just impossible. He vanished from holding the next day. In another instance, a traveller presented a passport from Catalonia, complete with visa stamps and banknotes from a currency no one recognised. The notes bore images of unfamiliar monarchs and landmarks no tourist had ever seen. One peculiar aspect of these cases? The individuals seem convinced of their origins. They're not playing games. They don't get tripped up in their stories. Their confusion is genuine. Some even get angry or emotional, as if the whole world has suddenly gone insane and left them stranded. Psychologists weigh in with a more grounded theory. Perhaps these are dissociative identity episodes. People in the midst of breaks from reality, inventing nations as part of delusional systems. But that fails to explain the physical evidence, the documents, the currency, the detail. Historians still argue whether the man from Taured ever existed at all. The tale remains unconfirmed by any official Japanese record. No police report, no immigration log. Yet the story persists, and the name Taured has become shorthand for travellers who don't belong. Some theorists take it further, suggesting that not only did the man come from another dimension, but that our world might be bleeding with others. That glitches like this occur more than we know, but are quickly hidden, brushed aside, or covered up. After all, no airport wants to admit they temporarily housed a man from a phantom nation. And if he was from a parallel world, what was his purpose? Business? Diplomacy? Surveillance? Here's a chilling thought. What if he didn't arrive by accident? Some fringe researchers believe entities from other dimensions are testing the boundaries, sending scouts, measuring our world, learning how to blend in. The man from Taured, then, might have been an ambassador or an invader. One curious detail often overlooked, the man's apparent disappointment. Not fear, not confusion, disappointment, as if he had expectations that weren't met. Maybe he'd hoped his world would match this one. Maybe he was searching for something, or someone, and he didn't find it. Today, the mystery has become a favourite among internet sleuths and sci-fi writers. The Mandela Effect crowd points to Taured as possible proof that timelines are merging, overlapping, or being rewritten in subtle, untraceable ways. If a traveller from another dimension can land in our airport, who's to say we're not slipping through cracks ourselves? So the next time you check your passport, look closely. Are the stamps from places you remember? Are the countries listed ones you can find on any map? And if a stranger sits beside you on a plane and speaks perfect English but insists he's from a land no one's ever heard of, maybe don't dismiss him outright. Maybe he's lost. Maybe he's looking for home. In 1971, two young boys digging in the garden of their family home in Hexham, a modest British town best known for its Roman ruins and long winters, unearthed something strange. Beneath the soil, nestled beside a hedge, they found two small stone heads. Roughly the size of fists, the heads were carved with crude, primitive features, bulging eyes, slashed mouths, and oddly coiled hair. The boys took them inside, thrilled with their find. That night, their house became a different place. Furniture began to move on its own. Doors opened and slammed. Strange scratching sounds echoed through the hallways. Objects shifted positions when no one was watching. The family's once quiet home was now a stage for something invisible and deeply unsettled. And then there were the footsteps, heavy ones, pacing back and forth in empty rooms. Whispers, too, just beneath the level of comprehension. The children complained of nightmares. The mother, shaken but practical, blamed the heads. She placed them in a cupboard. The disturbances grew worse. Eventually the heads were passed along to a local academic doctor, Anne Ross, an expert in Celtic artefacts and folklore. She agreed to take them in for study. She regretted it almost immediately. Within days, her own home was consumed by chaos. Books flew from shelves. Her dog cowered at invisible figures. Her teenage daughter claimed to see a tall, shadowy presence stalking the halls. Once she glimpsed it watching from a doorway. Humanoid, but wrong. Too large. Too still. Then came the most disturbing encounter. Dr. Ross awoke one night to the sound of heavy breathing. At the foot of her bed stood a creature, half man, half animal. Its face was wolf-like, with yellow eyes. It stared silently, then vanished. She called it a werewolf, and she wasn't alone. Neighbours reported similar sightings, dark figures darting through the woods, sheep found mutilated, a sense of dread that hung over the region like fog. The Hexham Heads had become more than archaeological curiosities. They were active. The artefacts were examined under lab conditions, made of concrete, not stone, not ancient, likely created in the 20th century. So why all the chaos? Then another twist. A local man came forward, claiming he had made the heads as toys for his children just a few years prior. He even demonstrated how he moulded them using leftover concrete from a DIY project. Case closed? Not quite. Even after the supposed origin was revealed, the disturbances continued. Dr. Ross's family moved homes, the heads passed from one researcher to another. Each new owner reported strange occurrences, electronic interference, ghostly apparitions, bizarre dreams, a feeling of being watched. Some began to wonder, if the heads were modern, could they still be cursed? One fringe theory suggests the heads were unintentionally imbued with something, perhaps by the land they were buried in, or through proximity to ancient energy lines known as ley lines. Others argue that the act of creating human likenesses, even crude ones, can invite spiritual attachment. Think of voodoo dolls, or the concept of an egregore, a thought form given power through collective belief. Historians still argue whether the heads are evidence of ancient spiritual residue, psychological contagion, or simply a hoax that took on a life of its own. But the oddest detail may be this. No two owners of the Hexham Heads describe the same experience. Some see wolves, others report poltergeist activity. A few hear voices speaking in languages no one recognises. It's as if the heads tailor the haunting to the individual, adapting, learning. Eventually the artefacts vanish from public record. No museum claims to have them. Some say they're hidden in a university archive, others that they were lost during a move. A few believe someone destroyed them, buried them again where they were found, deep in the earth where they could do no more harm. But the stories haven't stopped. Residents near the original dig site still report strange events. A flicker in the trees, a shadow with eyes that reflect like glass. One man, walking his dog near dusk, swore he saw the face of one of the heads smiling from inside a hollow tree. He didn't go back. And there's one last chilling detail. Of the two original boys who discovered the heads, one later suffered years of recurring dreams, of being buried alive, of stone pressing against his chest. The other became obsessed with ancient British folklore, particularly tales of guardian spirits bound to land through ritual carvings. He once said quietly that he never dug up the heads. He found them sitting in the soil, waiting. So next time you come across something old and eerie in the ground, a coin, a doll, a carved figure with empty eyes, think twice before you take it inside. Some things are meant to stay buried. February 19th, 1994. Riverside General Hospital, California. A young woman named Gloria Ramirez is rushed into the emergency room gasping for breath. She's 31 years old, battling advanced cervical cancer, and tonight her body is shutting down. The ER staff quickly surrounds her, hooking up IVs, applying oxygen, checking vitals. It's a scene they've handled 1,000 times before. But within minutes something happens. Something no medical textbook can explain. Nurse Susan Kane draws a syringe of blood from Gloria's arm. She notices something strange right away. The blood smells off, like ammonia. Then she sees odd particles floating in the syringe like shimmering crystals. Before she can react, she collapses. Another nurse stumbles backward, then slumps to the floor. A respiratory therapist follows. One by one, 6 ER staff members fall ill. Some faint, others vomit, a few seize. The emergency room is evacuated. Hazmat teams arrive, and in the middle of it all lies Gloria Ramirez, still dying. Within 45 minutes, she goes into cardiac arrest. Attempts to revive her fail. She's pronounced dead just after 8 p.m, but the mystery is just beginning. Why did 6 trained professionals collapse while treating her? What was in her blood? And more haunting, what did Gloria Ramirez become in her final hours? The media dubs her the toxic lady. An autopsy is delayed. Officials fear contamination. Samples are taken in sealed containers, examined under strict protocols. Initial tests show nothing unusual. No airborne toxins, no trace of industrial chemicals. Then come the theories. The first one blames panic. A mass psychogenic event, basically mass hysteria. One person fainted, and the others followed in a chain reaction of anxiety and adrenaline. But this doesn't account for the crystalline particles in the blood, or the ammonia smell, or the fact that some victims were unconscious for hours. Then a new theory emerges, one so bizarre it sounds like science fiction. Experts propose that Ramirez, in a desperate attempt to treat her pain, may have applied dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO, to her skin. A common industrial solvent, DMSO, is also used by some in alternative medicine as a muscle rub or pain reliever. It has a garlic-like odour and can carry other substances through the skin. On its own, DMSO isn't lethal. But here's where it gets strange. When DMSO enters the body, it can break down into dimethyl sulfone, DMSO2, still harmless. But under certain conditions, like the powerful defibrillators used on Ramirez, DMSO2 could transform again into dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic compound. Dimethyl sulfate can cause convulsions, paralysis and death if inhaled in small doses. It's absorbed through the skin and mucous membranes, and it's invisible. If this chain reaction occurred inside Ramirez's body, it would explain everything. The smell, the particles, the collapse of ER staff. Problem is, no one can prove it. The conditions needed for that transformation are incredibly specific. The heat, the chemical concentrations, the electrical charge, it's a long shot. And more puzzling, why hasn't this happened before, or since? Historians and chemists still argue whether the DMSO theory holds water, or if it's just the best guess in a case with no clear answer. Adding to the mystery, several of the affected hospital staff suffered long-term symptoms, liver issues, bone necrosis, chronic fatigue. Not the kind of thing hysteria usually causes. And then there's the final, unnerving twist. Gloria's body, when finally autopsied, showed signs of intense cellular damage not consistent with cancer alone. Some tissues had degraded in ways that suggest chemical exposure. Yet toxicology reports came back clean. No known poisons, no drugs, nothing. Her heart, her blood, her lungs. They tell two stories at once, as if something was there and then wasn't. Even more disturbing, the vials of blood taken from Gloria's body reportedly changed over time, developing strange colours and smells days after collection. One lab tech described opening a sealed sample and nearly blacking out from the fumes. To this day, the case remains officially unexplained. Some fringe theorists believe Gloria Ramirez became a kind of human reactor, a one-in-a-million biochemical event. Others say she was the unwitting victim of exposure to illegal or experimental cancer treatments, administered outside hospital knowledge. A few push it further. They suggest military-grade chemicals may have been involved, that her death and the chaos it caused was part of a cover-up involving toxic testing. No evidence supports this, but the lack of solid answers invites wild speculation. And then there are those who believe something more supernatural happened, that Ramirez was not just chemically altered, but fundamentally changed. That dying altered her biology in ways we don't yet understand. That, in her final moments, she became something unknowable. Her family, heartbroken and confused, fought to clear her name. Gloria wasn't a criminal, they said. Not a lab rat. Not a monster. Just a woman in pain, trying to live a little longer. But the world remembers her differently. Not for her life, but for what she became. Today her story is taught in medical mystery lectures. It's a case study in forensic science, chemical theory and psychological fallout. But it's also a chilling reminder of how little we understand about the body in extremis, how close life and death sit beside each other, and how easily something ordinary can spiral into the unimaginable. Gloria Ramirez's death was tragic, but her legacy, unexplainable. On the evening of February 19th, 1994, Gloria Ramirez is wheeled into the emergency room of Riverside General Hospital in Southern California. She's 31 years old, a mother of two, and dying of cervical cancer. The staff recognizes the signs: laboured breathing, low blood pressure, semi-consciousness. It looks like another tragic case of late-stage cancer. But what happens next turns a routine ER visit into one of the strangest and most unsettling medical mysteries in history. One that leaves seasoned doctors fainting, fleeing, and eventually questioning everything they thought they understood about the human body. Gloria is in pain. Nurses inject sedatives. A defibrillator is prepared. But as they draw blood, something odd happens. a nurse notices an unusual ammonia-like smell. Then she sees strange particles in the blood, manila-coloured crystals that float oddly, almost like shards of glass. Another nurse leans in to examine them and suddenly reels backward, dizzy. Her skin tingles. She feels faint. Within minutes, multiple staff members are collapsing. One nurse begins convulsing. Another loses consciousness entirely. A third develops breathing problems and is wheeled out on a gurney, the very equipment she was using on Gloria moments earlier. The ER becomes a disaster zone. Gloria remains on the table, her condition worsening, while her caregivers drop like dominoes. The hospital declares an internal emergency. Dozens are evacuated. A hazmat team is called. And amid all this chaos, Gloria Ramirez dies. But her death is not the end. It's the beginning. In total, 23 people become ill. 5 require hospitalization, and no one can figure out why. An autopsy is delayed for weeks, while the coroner's office tries to determine if Gloria's body is hazardous. Was she radioactive, poisoned, infected with some unknown virus? The media pounces. Gloria is dubbed the Toxic Lady. Headlines speculate about chemical warfare, alien pathogens, even government experiments. But beneath the frenzy is a real puzzle, and very few pieces. Eventually, 2 main theories emerge. The first is official. The California Department of Health concludes that the staff were victims of mass sociogenic illness. Basically, a kind of group hysteria. According to this view, one person's reaction to a strong odour triggered a wave of psychosomatic symptoms in others, compounded by stress in the confined ER space. But this explanation doesn't sit well with the staff who were there. These weren't civilians panicking at the sight of blood. These were trained professionals used to trauma and death, and many displayed physical symptoms, like liver damage and fainting, that aren't usually associated with hysteria. Which brings us to the second stranger theory. Some researchers, including a chemist named Dr. Patrick Grant, proposed that Gloria had used a home remedy called dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO. It's a solvent sometimes used topically for pain relief. On its own, it's relatively harmless, though not approved by the FDA for internal use. And interestingly, DMSO has a garlic-like or ammonia-like smell, which matches what the ER staff reported. Here's where it gets weird. In a high-oxygen hospital environment, DMSO can break down into dimethylsulfone. That's not dangerous either. But under the right conditions, if combined with the defibrillator's electric jolt, it could theoretically transform into dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic gas that causes convulsions, coma, and damage to organs, which is precisely what the ER staff experienced. So is Gloria's body a ticking chemical time bomb? Historians still argue whether the DMSO theory holds up. No experiment has been able to perfectly replicate the conditions. The chemistry is complex and would have required a precise mix of ingredients and environmental factors. But nothing else comes close. And then there's the other angle, perhaps the most unsettling of all. Why was Gloria in such bad shape so suddenly? She was dying of cancer, yes, but her condition deteriorated much faster than expected. Her family insists she was alert earlier that day, walking, even joking. Some have speculated she may have been involved in an unregulated experimental treatment, one that interacted unpredictably with her illness. Others wonder if the cancer itself, in advanced stages, might cause unknown chemical changes in the body. After her autopsy, toxicologists found abnormally high levels of amines and other compounds in her system. Nothing conclusive, just more questions. There's even a fringe theory, highly speculative, that suggests she wasn't the source at all, that the hospital was storing volatile chemicals improperly, and Gloria's presence simply catalyzed an accidental release. A theory with no hard evidence, but one that lingers. The case remains open-ended. No charges, no definitive answers. Just an unexplained death, a cluster of sickened professionals, and a body that behaved like something out of a science fiction novel. Gloria's story has faded from the headlines, but it hasn't been forgotten. She's often cited in toxicology studies and still discussed in medical mystery forums. Some researchers use her case to advocate for better chemical monitoring in hospitals. Others use it as a cautionary tale about jumping to psychiatric explanations when strange things happen. Because sometimes the strangest things are real. Gloria Ramirez was a person, a mother, a friend. Her story became legend because her final moments didn't make sense. Because the systems meant to understand death, science, medicine, even logic, failed her, and maybe that's why it haunts us. Not because we think she was a biohazard, but because she reminds us that we don't know everything, that our bodies, our tools, and even our hospitals still hold secrets. So the next time you're in a fluorescent lit room, full of beeping monitors and crisp white lab coats, remember, one night in Riverside, a woman walked in and every known rule of biology walked out. The word is carved with care, Croatoan, etched into a post, exposed to the wind and sun. It's the only clue left behind when the English colony of Roanoke vanishes without a trace. We're in the late 16th century. England, itching to rival Spain's dominance in the New World, has begun planting settlements across the Atlantic. One such venture takes root on Roanoke Island, off the coast of present-day North Carolina. In 1587, 117 settlers, men, women and children, establish a colony under the leadership of John White. It's England's second attempt at colonising the area. This time, they bring families, they bring ambition, they're planning to stay. White, a painter and cartographer, also happens to be the grandfather of Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. For a brief moment, the colony thrives. They build homes, explore nearby forests, and attempt uneasy trade with local tribes. But food grows scarce, tensions rise. White decides to return to England to gather more supplies. He leaves behind his family, promising to return quickly. He doesn't. A war with Spain erupts, diverting all English ships for military use. 3 years pass before White can sail back to Roanoke. When he finally arrives in August 1590, he finds nothing. No people, no bodies, no signs of struggle. The settlement is dismantled, not destroyed. Houses taken apart, not burned or shattered. Tools are gone. Boats vanished, as if everyone simply packed up and left. There's no graveyard, no mass death. Just that word, Croatoan. It's carved into a post of the fort. Nearby, the letters CRO are etched into a tree. White had told the colonists to carve a cross if they were in danger. There's no cross, just Croatoan, the name of a nearby island, now called Hatteras Island, and a friendly tribe who lived there. So White sails south to search. But a storm hits. His ship is damaged. Supplies dwindle. He is forced to turn back. He never sees the colonists again, and thus the mystery is born. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Historians have proposed dozens of theories. The most straightforward? The colonists joined the Croatoan tribe. There's logic to it. They were starving, low on defences and cut off. Aligning with a local group could have meant survival. Some supporting evidence exists. Later reports from other colonists and Native American tribes describe fair-skinned people living among the Croatoans, blue-eyed children, English-style clothing, but no physical proof ever surfaces. Others believe the colonists tried to sail back to England, or perhaps headed north to the Chesapeake Bay, but were lost at sea. Again, possible, but where's the wreckage? Where are the logs? The bones? Then there's the darker theory. Some scholars argue that the settlers were killed by hostile tribes, particularly the Powhatans. Oral histories from the region tell of a massacre. But if that were the case, why not leave signs? Why dismantle the homes? And why carve Croatoan rather than the name of the enemy? In the 1600s, John Smith, the same one from Pocahontas lore, encounters tribes who claim to have known of white people who had melted into native society. But again, no definitive trace. More recently, archaeological digs have uncovered intriguing items, English copper rings, bits of armour, pottery, on Hatteras Island and near the Albemarle Sound. Are these from the Roanoke settlers, or just later trade goods? It's impossible to say. In 2012, researchers studying a centuries-old map created by John White notice a tiny patch over one area. Underneath, using modern imaging, they find a symbol that looks like a fort. Could this be where the colonists went? The new settlement nearby? Excavations begin. Artifacts appear. But still, no names, no clear Roanoke connection. Historians still argue whether the colony integrated, migrated, or perished. Then there are the stranger explanations. One theory suggests Spanish saboteurs, operating from Florida, destroyed the colony covertly. Another claims the settlers succumbed to disease or starvation, then were buried or claimed by the wilderness. A few say the colonists split into multiple groups, moving inland and slowly vanishing into the American landscape. But fringe theories take a turn for the bizarre. Some believe supernatural forces played a role. Ancient spirits from native folklore, unhappy with foreign invaders. Others suggest alien abduction, or time slips, or portals into another dimension. No evidence supports these, of course, but in the absence of hard facts, speculation fills the void. The word Croatoan itself has gained mythic weight. It appears in other strange disappearances throughout history. When Edgar Allan Poe was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore just before his death, it said he whispered Croatoan. Sus. When the horror writer Ambrose Bierce vanished in Mexico in 1913, never to be seen again, the word was allegedly scrawled in his diary. Even Amelia Earhart's journal reportedly bore the word before her final flight, though all these claims are heavily disputed if not outright fabricated. Still, the word lingers like a shadow. And what of Virginia Dare, the baby girl who became America's first ghost child? She's become folklore too. Some say she survived and grew into a local legend, a white doe who haunts the forests of North Carolina, glimpsed only at twilight. Others imagine her marrying into a tribe, her descendants carrying quiet fragments of English blood for generations. No remains from the colony have ever been found. No graves, no DNA, just whispers. The lost colony has become more than a historical mystery. It's a cultural riddle, a symbol of beginnings and disappearances, of what it means to vanish without leaving footprints. If you stand on Roanoke Island today, amid the reconstructed walls and interpretive signs, you can almost feel the silence. The trees press in close. The wind carries salt and pine. You wonder what it was like in those final days. The decision to stay, to go, to trust. Did they carve Croatoan with hope, with desperation, or as a message meant for someone else entirely? Because somewhere between the forests and the sea, something happened. And the only thing left behind is a word. And maybe, if you listen long enough, it'll speak again. It's a book that seems to defy every rule of language, art and science. A manuscript of strange symbols, looping vines and impossible plants. Its pages are a garden of nonsense, a linguistic labyrinth that has confounded codebreakers, linguists and historians for over 600 years. Welcome to the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. The book itself is small, about the size of a modern paperback bound in limp vellum, but inside, hundreds of pages covered in tightly written script, an alphabet unknown to any human culture. Alongside the writing are illustrations, bizarre plants with curving leaves and roots like tentacles, astrological charts filled with strange stars, nude women bathing in green pools connected by pipes, and what appear to be elaborate recipes for something. It first appears on record in 1912 when Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer, buys it from a Jesuit library in Italy. He believes he's stumbled onto a medical manuscript, maybe alchemical, maybe magical. But he soon realises it's written in a code no one can read. He sends copies to top scholars, cryptographers who broke German wartime codes, linguists fluent in dead languages. No one gets close. It becomes known as the world's most mysterious manuscript, but its history stretches further back, much further. Carbon dating of the vellum pages places the book's creation between 1404 and 1438. The ink, too, appears to be consistent with medieval techniques. And buried in old letters and library catalogues, the manuscript is tentatively linked to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who may have believed it was the work of Roger Bacon, a 13th century English philosopher accused of dabbling in the occult. That claim is shaky, but deliciously Gothic. Over time, the manuscript passes through many hands, including that of an obscure alchemist and a Polish language professor who allegedly died in mysterious circumstances. Eventually, it ends up at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book Library, where it sits today in a sealed glass case, still taunting viewers. So what does it say? That's the central mystery. No one knows. The writing doesn't match any known script. It's written left to right, appears fluid and natural, and includes some 20 to 25 unique characters. But despite decades of analysis, the Voynichese language hasn't been cracked. Here's the kicker. Statistical studies of the text show patterns eerily similar to natural language. It has structure, word frequency, grammar-like repetition, not gibberish, but also not anything spoken by any known civilization. Linguists have compared it to everything, from medieval Latin to Old Georgian to Proto-Romance languages. Some suggest it might be an early constructed language, like Tolkien's Elvish, but 500 years earlier. Others believe it's a hoax, created to fool someone into thinking they'd bought an ancient book of wisdom. But that theory has problems. If it's a hoax, it's a perfect one. Too perfect. The text is consistent across hundreds of pages, with natural variations, spelling changes, and rules that match real-world language mechanics. It would take a lifetime to fake. And then there are the illustrations. Some pages resemble botanical drawings, except the plants don't exist. Not in any known biome, not in fossil records. A few appear vaguely familiar, as if real species were blended like smoothies. The roots often twist into anatomical shapes, or spiral like microscopic structures. Other pages show nude women bathing in what look like alchemical devices, pipes, chambers, distillation columns. Some scholars think these are metaphors for fertility or health. Others suggest the drawings describe an entire cosmology, a spiritual worldview lost to time. There are astrological symbols too, zodiac signs rendered with stars and strange creatures, moons that seem to represent cycles, calendars, charts. Some believe it maps an alternative universe, others that it encodes a philosophy beyond language. Cryptographers from World War II to the NSA have all taken a swing. The world's top codebreakers have spent years trying to identify patterns. Artificial intelligence has been trained on the script. Dozens of solutions have been proposed, including one in 2018 by a team claiming it's a forgotten Proto-Romance language. That team was quickly rebutted. Every decryption attempt has failed the ultimate test: consistency. Anyone can invent a key that decodes a few lines. But none have worked for the whole book. And historians still argue whether the manuscript is real, fake, or something in between. A failed magical text, a mnemonic device, or a sacred manual lost in translation. Even more unsettling. New pages occasionally reveal new puzzles. Infrared scans show faint diagrams beneath some of the illustrations, maps, grids, and architectural shapes. One fold-out page reveals a multi-ring system that looks like both a galaxy and a medieval temple. Was it meant to guide the reader's mind? Or something else? A quirky, lesser-known detail. Many of the pages feature tiny stars, almost hidden in corners. Some believe they were part of a code meant to be read across the manuscript like constellations. And the women, dozens of them, always the same style, the same face. Pale, plump, hair bobbed. Not goddesses, not peasants. Just there, performing cryptic rituals. Some seem to cry. Others float in water. A few appear to pass through strange doors into other realms. Is the manuscript spiritual, scientific, satirical? One theory suggests it's a guide for a female-centric religion, now lost. Another believes it's a pharmaceutical codex, an ancient guide to plant-based healing. Or perhaps the Voynich manuscript is what it appears to be, a record from a world we never knew. One that ran parallel to ours, using different plants, different stars, a different way of seeing, and it was written down, once, then forgotten. Today you can view the entire manuscript online. Scholars still pore over it. Enthusiasts try DIY decryptions. Some even claim to dream in Voynichese after staring at it too long. But so far no one has cracked the code. No one knows who wrote it, and no one knows why. It simply exists. Like a whisper from the past that refuses to speak. Two dead men lie on a Brazilian hillside. It's the evening of August 20th, 1966, and the sun is slipping behind the dusty hills of Niterói, just across Guanabara Bay from Rio de Janeiro. The terrain is rugged, scattered with weeds and broken rock. A young boy flying a kite stumbles upon the bodies, partially concealed in thick brush. When police arrive, they're greeted by a scene that only deepens the confusion. The men are dressed in formal suits. Over their faces they wear strange lead masks. Crude, hand-cut sheets of metal moulded to their faces like heavy sunglasses. Their hands are folded across their chests. Nearby, investigators find an empty water bottle, 2 towels and a notebook. In the notebook, a short cryptic note scrawled in Portuguese. 1630 be at the agreed place. 1830 ingest capsules. After effect protect metals awaits signal mask. That's it. No poison is found. No signs of violence. No external wounds, no cause of death. And that's how the story of the lead masks case begins. The men are soon identified as Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana, local electronics repairmen from Campos dos Goitacazes, a town 200 kilometres away. They were last seen 2 days earlier boarding a bus to Niterói. They told their families they were going to buy equipment for work, but the contents of their bags say otherwise. In addition to the notebook, the men carried a plastic bag filled with water bottles and raincoats, despite it being sunny and dry. They also carried large amounts of cash and tools used in the electronic tinkering, notably absent any food, personal belongings or shelter items. It seems they weren't planning on being gone long. The pathologist assigned to the case has a problem. The bodies are too decomposed to determine an exact cause of death. He can't test for poison. By the time an autopsy is ordered, key organs are already liquefied. No toxins can be detected. The official death certificates list the cause simply as unknown. So what really happened on that hillside? Theories predictably explode. The most prominent centres on the possibility that Manuel and Miguel were spiritualists. Reports suggest they belong to a small local group interested in metaphysical phenomena, spirit communication, astral projection, and contact with extraterrestrial beings. The lead masks in this context might have been designed to protect their eyes from blinding light, possibly during a vision or a signal, as the cryptic note suggests, await signal mask. One popular theory is that they were attempting some kind of psychic or extraterrestrial contact, that the capsules mentioned in the note were hallucinogens or sedatives designed to induce an altered state. The lead masks were perhaps based on pseudoscientific beliefs about radiation, energy, or even alien rays. But if this was a ritual, why did it end in death? One possibility is that the capsules were stronger than expected, perhaps laced with barbiturates, or laced with something else entirely. The men may have overdosed, unaware of the potency. Another idea suggests they were misled, given deadly substances by someone else, and that's where the story takes another turn. Some witnesses report seeing a third man with them on the bus, a man who was never identified. Could he have supplied the capsules? Could he have stolen something afterward? There were no signs of robbery, but the police investigation was less than thorough. Others believe it was a suicide pact. But if so, why the elaborate gear? Why the masks? Why go to a remote hill and write instructions in code? And then there's the fringe view. Some point to reports that lights were seen in the sky over the hill the night the men died. Local children claim to have seen a large orange oval hovering briefly before zipping away. Police dismissed it as hysteria. But spiritualists in Brazil have long believed in a connection between UFOs and psychic energy. Some believe the men truly expected to meet something. Whether they did is another matter. Historians still argue whether the masks were designed to shield the soul, or simply the eyes. Lead has a long history in mysticism. In alchemy, it's associated with Saturn, the planet of death, time, and transformation. Were they trying to cross over? To ascend? There's also the troubling parallel to another case. In 1962, 4 years earlier, 2 other technicians in Brazil died under mysterious circumstances while reportedly experimenting with a psychic machine built to communicate with spirits. No foul play was ever proven, but the similarities to Manuel and Miguel's fate are unsettling. Could a fringe movement have encouraged people to die in pursuit of visions? One lesser-known detail, the hill where the bodies were found, Morro do Vintém, was once considered a spiritual site by indigenous groups. Some even claimed it was cursed, or at least thin, the kind of place where the veil might lift. If so, perhaps Manuel and Miguel chose it carefully. Then again, maybe they were just 2 men caught in the grip of bad science and bigger dreams. In the end, we're left with a few pieces of paper, 2 lead masks, and a hillside where something strange, went terribly wrong. No one ever came forward with more information. No third man was found. The cause of death was never confirmed, and the mystery sits there still, quiet, patient, like the masks themselves, simple, heavy, blank, waiting for someone to see what they saw, or to hear the signal. The year is 1900. A lighthouse stands tall on the remote Flannan Isles, a cluster of rocky islets northwest of mainland Scotland. The nearest neighbours, storms, seabirds, and the occasional passing ship. The lighthouse, perched atop Island Moor, the largest of the Flannans, is relatively new, just completed the previous year. 3 seasoned keepers are assigned to maintain it: Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. They are not new to isolation. Life as a lighthouse keeper is one of endurance. Long days of maintenance, brutal wind, solitude broken only by log entries and oil lamps. But what happens over the next few weeks turns this already bleak routine into one of maritime history's most chilling mysteries. On December 26th, a ship called the Hesperus arrives at the island to deliver supplies and relieve one of the keepers. What they find shocks the crew. The lighthouse is completely deserted. No one greets them at the dock, no signal flags, no sound from the tower. When the relief team climbs the steep path to the compound, they find the entrance locked. Inside, the kitchen looks frozen in time. Half-eaten meals on the table, an overturned chair. One of the clocks has stopped. The beds are cold. 2 of the men's heavy weather gear, coats and boots, are missing. But the third set is still hanging on its hook. Strange, given that the weather outside is typical for the Flannans. Fierce, but not unmanageable. It's as if 2 had gone out, and the third had followed in a hurry, without dressing. But there's more. A logbook is discovered. The last few entries raise eyebrows. One describes a violent storm, stronger than anything the men had seen before. Another notes strange behaviour. One keeper is reportedly crying, another praying, both unusual for these hardened men. The final entry simply reads, "Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all." After that, silence. No trace of the keepers is ever found. Not a boot, not a coat, not a body. Just that eerie stillness. So what happened? The official investigation offers a practical explanation. A rogue wave. The theory goes like this. A fierce storm swept in. The men went out to secure equipment or check on a malfunctioning crane at the island's western landing. A freak wave, some say 100 feet high, swept them away. One by one, no time to scream, no chance to escape. It's plausible. The island is steep and treacherous, with sheer cliffs and unpredictable surf. And yet, problems remain. For one, there was no record of a major storm in the area on the days in question. Shipping logs from nearby vessels described rough seas, but nothing catastrophic, and the logbook's mention of calm sea doesn't match the wave theory. And what about the man who didn't take his coat? Why would he venture out into a storm in shirt sleeves? And the door, locked from the inside. Then the theories begin to spiral. Some say a fight broke out among the men, perhaps over cabin fever, or a lover's quarrel or a bout of madness. 2 fell. The third, overcome by guilt or despair, threw himself off the cliffs. Others believe in supernatural causes. Locals whisper that the island is cursed, that the Flannans were once sacred to ancient druids, that the land still pulses with old, wild power. Some say the keepers were taken by spirits, or sea creatures, or something else entirely, vanished into mist and wave like a breath on a mirror. Fringe theorists go further. A few suggest alien abduction. Why not when no bodies are found? Or a time slip. That they stepped out of this world by accident, caught in some magnetic anomaly that erased them from time. Even the name, Island Moor, sounds like something out of a poem. The big island, big in mystery too. Historians still argue whether the Flannan Isles' disappearance was simply a tragedy of timing or something far stranger. Maritime records were carefully scrubbed. The British Northern Lighthouse Board issued stern warnings against speculation. But speculation persisted. In the decades since, the Flannans have become a symbol of the unexplained. A case where everything should make sense and yet nothing does. The story inspired poems, plays, even folk songs. W. H. Auden wrote of it. The Scottish ballads tell it with ghostly wails. Modern movies borrow its bones to build tales of psychological unravelling and nautical dread. And the lighthouse? It's now automated. No keepers, no humans at all. Just blinking lights, turning through fog, watching over the sea with mechanical patience. If you ever visit the area, boat captains will take you close, but not too close. The cliffs are steep, the tides still treacherous, and besides, the place carries a feeling, not a ghost story, something quieter, a presence, as if the island remembers. And when the wind howls just right through the tower's empty ice, some say it carries 3 voices, not shouting, not screaming, just whispering to each other, still waiting to be heard. It's early morning on December 1st, 1948, and a man's body lies slumped against a seawall on Somerton Beach near Adelaide, Australia. He's dressed immaculately in a suit and tie, shoes polished, hair neatly parted. His posture is strangely serene, legs extended, ankles crossed, head tilted slightly, as though he simply sat down to rest and never got up. The man is dead. There's no blood, no wounds, no signs of a struggle. His pockets contain a few mundane items: a used bus ticket, an unused train ticket, a comb, a pack of chewing gum, and a pack of cigarettes, with a different brand cigarettes inside. But there's no wallet, no ID, no name. A mystery begins. The press dubs him the Somerton Man. Authorities try to identify him, but every clue leads nowhere. His fingerprints match no known records. His dental chart? No match in the country. His clothing has no labels. They've all been carefully cut out. Not just the jacket tag, but even the manufacturer's stamps inside his underwear. Who takes that much care to be anonymous? Then, things get weirder. Months later, investigators examine a secret pocket in the man's pants, one so well hidden it's almost overlooked. Inside, they find a tiny rolled-up scrap of paper. On it, in ornate print, 2 Persian words, Tamam Shud. It translates to "it is ended," or "the end." The phrase is the final line of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of 12th century Persian poetry that contemplates mortality, fate, and the fleeting nature of life. Already strange, but wait. A search of local bookstores turns up a breakthrough. A man steps forward, claiming he found a copy of the Rubaiyat tossed into the back seat of his unlocked car near the beach the same night the Somerton Man was discovered. Tucked inside the book is a torn section, precisely where Tamam Shud was printed. It's a perfect match. On the inside back cover of the book are faint penciled markings. Invisible to the naked eye, they emerge under UV light. A series of capital letters arranged in 5 irregular lines, broken and jumbled. A code. Despite decades of analysis by cryptographers, linguists and intelligence agencies, including those involved in World War II code breaking, no one has ever successfully deciphered it. The structure doesn't match any known cipher. The letters may be initials or a personal shorthand or nonsense, but they seem deliberate. Below the code is a phone number. It belongs to a woman named Jessica Thompson, a nurse who lives just 5 minutes from the beach. She claims not to know the man, but when police show her a plaster cast of his face, she nearly faints. Her behaviour is described as very strange, shocked, and guarded. She says she once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat and gave it away to a man named Alfred Boxall during the war. Authorities track down Boxall. He's alive, well, and still in possession of the book, with Tamam Shud intact. So who was the dead man? Some theorists believe he was a spy. The Cold War was heating up, and Adelaide housed several sensitive military facilities, including a nearby rocket range and a naval base. The meticulous grooming, the removed tags, the untraceable identity, classic hallmarks of intelligence agents. Others point to poison. The man's autopsy reveals an enlarged spleen, congestion in the liver and stomach, and a brain full of hemorrhaging capillaries, all signs of acute poisoning. But toxicology reports find nothing. No trace of cyanide, barbiturates, or known toxins. Could it have been a rare, untraceable poison? Some suggest digitalis or strafanthin, both cardiac glycosides used in espionage circles, effective in tiny doses and difficult to detect after death. Historians still argue whether the Somerton Man's death was suicide, murder, or something far more complex. Jessica Thompson, later known by her married name, dies in 2007. In a strange twist, her son, Robin, is later suspected by some researchers of being the Somerton Man's child. Robin had a rare anatomical feature, a hyperdontia of the incisors and a specific type of ear shape, both shared by the corpse. DNA testing decades later only deepens the mystery. In 2021, after decades of lobbying, the Somerton Man's body is exhumed for DNA analysis. In 2022, using advanced forensic genealogy, a name is finally proposed. Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne who disappeared around the same time. But even with the name, nothing is settled. There's no clear reason why Webb would travel to Adelaide. No known link to Jessica Thompson. No explanation for the code. No proof of espionage. No known relatives who can explain why he vanished or how he died. And the Rubaiyat remains, the perfect symbol for this story. A book of fate, riddles, and endings. A man with no name dies by the sea, a slip of poetry in his pocket. It is ended. Or is it? Because even with a possible name, the case is still wide open. Webb's life remains a blank. His connections, unknown. His motives, lost. And if the code was his, what was he trying to say? The case remains one of the most baffling in Australian history. A dead man, a Persian poem, a woman who flinches at a glance, and a code that won't crack. It's the kind of mystery that writes itself, but refuses to end. Spain, 1971. In the small, unassuming town of Belmez de la Moraleda, something begins to appear that defies logic and terrifies everyone who sees it. It starts in a kitchen. Maria Gomez Camara, a housewife living in a modest home on Calle Real, notices a stain forming on her concrete floor. Nothing new. Spanish kitchens often develop discoloured patches from cooking, heat, or age. But this one has eyes. As the stain develops, it takes the shape of a human face, distorted, sorrowful, with sunken eyes and a long, mournful mouth. The image seems to emerge from the concrete, not just on it. Maria calls her husband, Juan, who shrugs it off, but the face remains, growing more defined by the day. Then it changes. Another face appears, then another, all different, some with blank, mask-like expressions, others howling in what looks like pain. Word spreads. Neighbours come to see. Some pray, others cry, still others whisper that something terrible must have happened here. Terrified, the family tries to erase the images. They scrub the floor with soap and bleach, no effect. They chip away at the concrete. The faces return. So they remove the entire section of floor and pour fresh cement. A week later, the faces come back. This time, more vivid. News travels fast. Journalists, scientists, priests and paranormal researchers descend on the small home. The phenomenon becomes known as Las Caras de Belmez, the faces of Belmez. The faces appear to move and evolve. One week, a face may look peaceful. The next, it seems to be screaming. Some look masculine, others feminine. A few are downright skeletal. The family takes photographs to track their development. Independent observers confirm the changes. The faces seem to fade, reappear, or morph under different lighting and angles. In 1972, the Spanish government orders an investigation. A team of scientists from the Instituto de Cerámica y Vidrio, under the Higher Council for Scientific Research, analyse the floor. They find no evidence of paint, dyes, or known chemicals. The images appear embedded within the cement, impossible to scrub out, resistant to any solvent. They take samples to labs in Madrid. Still, no clear answer. Historians are brought in to examine the property's past. What they find deepens the mystery. The house sits atop what was once a medieval graveyard. Skeletal remains are found beneath the kitchen floor during a dig. Multiple bodies, unmarked, long forgotten. Some appear to date back to the Islamic period of Spain. Others are likely Christian. No one knows how many lie below. Were the faces a manifestation of restless spirits? Priests are consulted. Some suggest an exorcism. Others urge caution. If the phenomenon is spiritual, disturbing it might worsen things. The family, now the reluctant centre of national attention, agrees to let further tests continue. Over the next few years, the faces multiply. They appear not only in the kitchen, but in the hallway and adjoining rooms. They move from the floor to the walls. One wall section is sealed behind plexiglass as part of an experiment. Cameras are set up. The face within grows clearer over time, without any human contact. Then, one face disappears completely during a public viewing. A new one appears 2 feet away. Skeptics, of course, push back. Some argue the images are a hoax, painted using photosensitive chemicals that react to heat or light. Others claim pareidolia is to blame, the human tendency to see faces in random patterns, like clouds or wood grain. But these explanations don't account for the image's permanence, their layered depth, or their documented changes. A few attempt to prove fraud by recreating similar images using salt and vinegar on concrete. The results look cartoonish compared to the eerily expressive faces of Belmez. And then there's Maria herself. She never profits from the phenomenon. In fact, she finds it emotionally draining. Over the years, she reportedly grows sick, worn thin by the constant attention. She never claims to understand the faces, only that they seem to be part of the house now. She prays often, keeps her home clean, and never seeks media deals. When Maria dies in 2004, many wonder if the faces will stop. But they don't. In fact, some believe they increase. New images appear in rooms previously untouched. And then something even stranger. Voices. Visitors report faint whispers in the house, disembodied sounds, a low moan, a call from the hallway, a breath that brushes your neck as you lean toward the floor. Electronic voice phenomena, EVP, specialists record unexplained murmurs in Spanish and Arabic, saying things like, "Help me," "Leave," and "This is mine." Historians still argue whether the Belmez faces are the greatest paranormal hoax of the 20th century, or the most compelling proof of life after death. The town embraces its notoriety cautiously. A small museum opens. Ghost hunters arrive with cameras and EMF meters. Some claim to capture strange temperature drops. Others swear they see eyes in the plaster shift as they move. But the house remains lived in, quietly. As of the last reports, the faces continue to emerge. Some fade after a few years. Others linger for decades. And new ones appear, always when least expected. Near door frames, under chairs, even in the pattern of dust near the sink. Whatever they are, they don't seem to want to leave. Theories today range from residual haunting to psychokinetic manifestation, suggesting that Maria, or someone in the house, subconsciously projected these faces through raw emotional energy. A fringe theory claims the house sits on a geoanomalous zone, a place where Earth's magnetic fields interact with human consciousness in strange ways. Others believe the soil itself holds trauma, that the ground remembers. If so, perhaps the faces are the land speaking, whispering its forgotten names through concrete skin, and if you visit the home today you can still stand in the kitchen. The tiles are cold, the air still, you may see nothing, or you may glance down and see a pair of eyes looking back, silent, timeless, and very, very real. In the English village of Woolpit, sometime in the 12th century, farmers working near a pit, a deep trench likely left over from the area's extensive wolf traps, come across two children standing alone by the edge of the woods. A boy and a girl. They're holding hands. They appear disoriented, wary, unsure of where they are, and their skin is green. The villagers freeze. This isn't just sunburn or sickness. The children are completely green, like the colour of fresh peas. Their clothes are made of unfamiliar fabric, their language unintelligible. No one recognises them. They don't seem to recognise anything. They are taken in by the local lord, Sir Richard de Calne, who shelters them at his manor. The girl and boy cry often. They refuse to eat anything offered, bread, meat, porridge, until someone brings green beans still in their stalks. That they devour. For days they survive only on beans, as if they've never seen any other food. Gradually they begin to adapt. The green tinge of their skin fades over time, though never completely. Their language remains unknown, but the girl, after many months, begins to learn English. Tragically, the boy grows ill and dies soon after baptism, but the girl survives. She's eventually baptized, raised among the villagers, and even takes a local name. And when she can finally communicate, she tells a story no one expects. She says they came from a land where the sun never rose. The sky was always twilight. Everything had a greenish hue. They lived underground or perhaps in a shadowed valley. She says they were tending to their father's animals when they heard a strange sound, a kind of bell, and followed it through a cave. The next thing they knew, they were in Woolpit. She claims there's another land nearby hers, separated by a river of light, but they couldn't cross it. Historians quickly file the case under folklore. The tale is preserved in two main chronicles, those of Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh, both respected historians of their time. The accounts differ slightly but share core details: two children, green skin, strange language, survival on beans, and a mysterious homeland. So, what were they? One theory suggests they were Flemish immigrants. During the 12th century, England saw waves of Flemish refugees fleeing conflict. Some settled in East Anglia, exactly where Woolpit is located. The children might have been orphaned during an uprising, speaking only their native dialect, and hiding in the forests. The green skin, possibly chlorosis, a form of anemia common in the Middle Ages, which gave the skin a greenish pallor, or malnutrition. The strange clothing, Flemish dress, the beans, perhaps the only food they recognised or trusted. It makes a tidy, rational story, but it doesn't quite fit. Why would two children leave a safe refugee camp, wander into deep woods, and emerge alone, with no knowledge of the local language or landmarks? And the girl's story, of a land with no sun, of green twilight, of a river of light, harder to explain. Some fringe theorists go wild with speculation. One theory posits the children were from a parallel dimension, and the bell they heard was a sonic anomaly, a portal opening. The green light of their world, the strange sunless sky, and their disorientation could all suggest a bleed-through between realities. Another theory links them to subterranean legends, like the Hollow Earth theory, or the Fae folk of Celtic mythology. In many European tales, green is the colour of otherworldly beings. Children taken by the Fae are often described as strange, silent, and unnaturally coloured. Still others lean into astronomical explanations. Could the children have suffered from a rare exposure to radiation? Perhaps their village was near a mineral deposit, causing pigmentation changes and health issues. But that assumes a technology or natural force far ahead of 12th century awareness. And there's one final detail that haunts the tale. After the girl grows into adulthood, she marries a man from King's Lynn. She becomes fully integrated into society. Her name is recorded as Agnes. Some say she becomes known for being wanton and impish, perhaps echoing her unusual origins, but she never again mentions her homeland, never elaborates on what she saw. Historians still argue whether her story was misunderstood, mistranslated, or a medieval fable meant to warn against wanderers and outsiders, but the records exist, the names are recorded, the pit is still there, and villagers still speak of the children who came from nowhere. Today, Woolpit is a quiet place, but it hasn't forgotten. Signs near the village welcome you to the land of the green children. Local legends are passed down in schools. A carved statue of two small children, hands clasped, stares out from a memorial stone. And if you ask the right person, they'll tell you the wood still hums sometimes. That strange lights flicker near the old wolf pit. And maybe, just maybe, if you're quiet, you'll hear a bell. Not from any church, but from somewhere else entirely, calling you home, wherever that may be. And now, dear listener, as our long journey through shadows and secrets draws to a close, let's ease back from the edge of wonder. The mysteries linger, don't they? Like the taste of a dream you can't quite remember, the whisper of something vast just beyond the reach of explanation. Let the tension melt from your shoulders now. Whatever truth lies behind the faces in the floor, the children in the twilight, or the vanished hikers in the snow, we carry their stories like stars in our pockets, small, flickering, and still glowing long after the night has passed. Breathe in deep. The world is quieter now. The questions can rest, if only for tonight. The unknown will still be there tomorrow, patient and unchanged, waiting for another curious soul. But for now, let your mind drift. Float gently, like fog curling through old forests or wind rippling across forgotten oceans. You've wandered far, seen the unseeable. You've earned your rest. Sleep well, brave dreamer.